Here we are again, nice hot sunny day in my workshop. My name's Colwin Way and we're bringing the Skills Centre to your home. As you know, I work for Axminster Tools, and a massive part of my my job is teaching people how to turn. And most of those people that we're teaching to turn are complete beginners. So this week we're going to go back to basics and look at how we instruct at beginner level. One of those things, of course, is how do I afford timber? Because timber, as you know, timber prices when they're converted, dried, turned into blanks, all those sort of things can be fairly expensive. So probably one of the best bits of advice is to buy wet timber. And in this series of videos that we've been doing with the Axminster Skills Centre, we've looked at rough turning. So we've turned some palm pots, we've turned some wet timber. In fact, the wet timber pot, if you remember, weeks and weeks ago now, we turned a piece of wet walnut. How wonderful that has moved, the shapes that it's gone. Now that will be finished in some point. I wanted to do it to finish its actual moving. So once it's done that, we can start thinking about sanding. Hang on.
Just wait a minute, there's no sound apparently.
We've got no sound, right then. In that case, let's have a look at sound.
Nothing's really gone. Just go back and see if it...
2 seconds everyone, if you can hear me. There, have we got sound, everybody? Have we got sound, everyone? Can you all hear me? Just say yes, let Charlie know if you can.
Some have, some haven't.
Some have, some haven't. Well, that's good, because I know it's not my side then in that case. Okay, let me just carry on, and hopefully that we'll pick the sound up as we go. This was that wet walnut piece that we turned several weeks ago now. It's done some really interesting things. It's moved a lot. You can see how much the bark has sunken in. That's made quite attractive. There's a little bit of tarnishing from drying process, and I'll sand that off later on. But that's going to be a really interesting piece. I like that piece. That's the issue. When it comes to drying your wet pieces, they are going to move. So I've got a selection of pieces here, different shape pieces, hollow forms. Here, a couple of different sizes of hollow form. They've done their moving. They're nice and ready to turn. You can see the sort of shapes that one's going, for instance. We've got regular shape bowls. This is quite an interesting one. So regular shape bowls, but again, that's more of an oval now than a round that it started. But we're going to look at quite an interesting timber. Oak is one of my favourite timbers. This particular oak is called Luckham's oak, and Luckham's oak is an Exeter, so the city of Exeter in Devon. The Luckham oak was brought into that city by a gentleman called Luckham, and it's a really interesting one to turn. But very, very difficult to dry though. It really moves an awful lot. So I've got a whole series of these little platters. So I thought I'll turn one of those for you. I want to go over different ways of remounting them once you've wet turned and once they've dried, once they've moved. So I think that might be quite an interesting one, because there's always an issue that I get asked about is how remounting once dry. So we're going to look at that now. So as usual, Charlie is on hand to ask all the questions if you have any questions, so please ask Charlie, he'll forward them on. I will stop, we'll bring the camera in when we need to see what's happening. So here are my Luckham oak bowls or platters. This is the one we're going to turn here. It's done all of its moving. Let's see if I can give you some good idea of the movement that we've got. If I get that, is that level with the camera there, Charlie? Can you see the amount of movement? So that's the thing we've got to deal with. So you've got all sorts of potential ways of doing that. I'm going to use a fairly basic way, an easy way of doing it. We're going to go with a chuck. I've kept a foot here. Now that's one thing. If you are going to do a lot of rough turning, I would always go with a foot. If you go with a recess, because of what happens to the bowls, the movement they create, it's much harder to grab once they've dried. You've also got to take a lot of material away. With this, you could reshape it if you want to. That's going to be sacrificial. That'll be taken away afterwards or reshaped into part of the foot. Much easier put a foot on than create a recess. What we're going to do here is hold that foot. I then will turn a recess on the inside, which I can expand into. Then I'll finish the back side, turn it over and start turning normally. Other options that we have though, so let's say a conventional bowl size. So here's a drive. So that's on a faceplate. If you think about putting some router matting over the top of that, obviously a bigger piece than that, but router matting over the top, put your bowl over, use the tailstock to push against, so a push plate basically, and then you can turn the outside, create your foot, and do the inside. If your bowl's a different shape than that would be used for that, then you could go with a push plate. So push plates, let's pop that there a minute. Push plate is one of those, and if you've seen many of the series that we're doing now, then you would have seen me use the push plate. It's the same thing that I've just showed you there. That goes onto my chuck via a faceplate ring, and then you use the tailstock, push the bowl against the push plate, and you can start working on the outside edge. It's a very quick and simple way of working that one. Other methods, of course. So let's say, for instance, I want to hold the outside of that one. So I've got a chuck hold there, but if you didn't have the chuck hold, then if you use your tailstock again, and you can use cone drive, so this type of thing, that's held in the chuck, that can go straight over the top, and that just creates basically a pressure plate so that you can drive against, like a cone drive. Okay, so there's lots of ways of doing it. As long as it's nice and secure, never have wood on wood, so you want to sandwich either router matting or tissue, that sort of thing, between the two bits of timber, then you're fine. Otherwise you create a burn if anything slips, for instance. So let's go straight into the bowl. It is a really, really interesting oak, this one, and can be really colourful. A lot of sawyers don't like to cut it. It does cause problems in cutting. You're lucky to get it a lot of places. A lot of places just turn it down. But I like it. It does move a little bit like Ilex oak, so quite an amount. But this one was turned probably this time last year, actually. So all I'm going to do, I've got a nice set of dovetails here. I'm going to position the oval base now so it hits all of those jaws, and we're not doing a huge amount of turning, just making a recess here. There we go. So Charlie, would you get the camera so it comes in that sort of angle? We're going to look at turning the inside of the bowl just very briefly. Lane speed definitely to 0, no surprises here because we've got a huge amount of movement. We've got to be quite careful. Does that glare too much, Charlie? Are you happy with that? All good? Right, and I'm going to, on the inside, let's use a set of jaws. Let's go for, in fact, I use the jaws that are there on the outside. So let me just whip that off. I'm just going to measure them for you so you can see. Okay, so they're the A+ jaws. Grab a rule. So I'm going to shut those to their perfect circles. So we're going to go to there, so the optimum size, and we're now going to cut this to, I want to be cutting to an 85mm, so I'm just going to mark that on the bowl. Looks like they're set already, so that's perfect. So just making sure all 4 jaws are spanning the base. All right, so we're way off centre. That's fine though, because we've got a lot of timber in there. If you remember from previous videos, I said we can keep this to about 1 inch. That's about right. It allows plenty of movement, but it also holds enough material in there to return the bowl afterwards. So let's just clean up that surface. So I'm just going to make a clean finish on the bottom. We've got a little bit of wobbling going on at the moment. Not too worried about that just yet. We are going to have the extractor on quite often on this piece actually, because it is quite a dusty material. So just taking a little bit of the waste material out, ready to do our recess.
Will you be doing anything on indexing anytime soon?
I would say yes, absolutely. I've got the perfect project. It's a bit Christmassy, but what I would like to do for you is to do a couple of projects that span a couple of demonstrations. You may have seen that from a few of our demos, we're cutting quite fine to the hour. So I'd like to span a few. So maybe some of those Christmassy things. So to answer your question, yes, we're going to do something with indexing. Probably 3 or 4 weeks time. So we'll see how we go. I've got something a little bit more interesting for you on Thursday. Something slightly different for you on Thursday. And then next week we're going to start a 2-part project. Now I'll reveal more as the week goes on. But I reckon 3 or 4 weeks time we'll be able to do some indexing. There we are. Now if you're going to do a load of bowls, that's your first thing you would do. Don't go any further, just cut your recesses. Get them all to that point and you're away. I just made a silly mistake. I've gone and cut the internal size, not the external size. So the external size is what's needed. There we are. So I've just made that a bit bigger now. You might be questioning why I didn't measure that. Well, I made the mistake, but now what I can do on the outside, which I can't do on the inside of the jaw, is if I look down the back of the bowl, I can actually see the jaws on this sort of thin platter, so I can sort of get away with that. I still want to be nice and accurate though on the jaw, so what I'm going to do is just double check now. Don't leave anything to chance. Double check. We've got a dovetail on the outside of the jaw, so let's close it down. I'll expand it and see where we are in terms of foot. And I'm looking for a 6mm gap between the jaws. At that point I know we're at our perfect circle. And I think that's a little bit of luck there, but we're there. That's exactly what I want. Maybe Charlie, this is a difficult shot, but you able to get that camera to look down the back of that bowl, and just so people can see, right in there I want to go. Might have to take the camera off the stand. It's alright. Don't feel sick, everybody. We're just jiggling things around. So just what I wanted to show you in here, look, you see the gap there. I want to be around about 6mm gap between the jaws. At that point I know that we're at the right diameter, so that was good, and that's really secure. Look at all that surface, touching there. It's going to be really nice and strong. Thanks, Charlie. There we are. If the bowl's much bigger, instead of a regular If the bowl's much bigger, then instead of a regular chuck key, you might want to go for a long chuck key. They're really useful on big platters if you're putting the chuck inside a piece. Okay, how long have we been, Charlie?
16 minutes.
16 minutes. Oh, no problem. Right then, so on here, this is going to be a sacrificial foot. I'm going to use a different set of jaws to hold the sacrificial foot. So we're going to measure again. This time we're going to measure the right part of the jaw, internal grip this time, not the external bit. Which happens to be 55 millimeters. So that's all set, and I'm going to use C jaws on those.
What was the wood?
This is called a Luckham's oak. It's a very localised oak from Exeter. You'll learn a lot more about Luckham's oak if you look online. I got this in one of my local timber yards. So all I'm doing here is just cleaning that base. That won't be part of the finished bowl. Then I'm going to make my sacrificial foot. We can cut that in, and I'll cut that in just with a parting tool. Doesn't have to be overly deep because the jaws that I'm using only have a tooth that measures, it's about 2 millimeters, so we don't have to go crazy. Now a little pull cut, just a little pull cut to take away the waste. So there's going to be nothing clean about this cut, but a pull cut is a great waste remover for us. So we're just going to drag that uneven surface out of the way. Stop the lathe. Don't look at the surface yet. That's not how it's going to look. Let's just clean up that outside edge. I'm not going to mess around moving the tool rest while that lathe's running on the outside edge. It's too dangerous. So stop the lathe, make sure you've got nothing contacting the rest, and then we can start thinking about cleaning that surface. And on my finishing cuts, I'm just dropping the handle a little bit further and rotating that flute inward more, so we get generating almost like a skew cut. It really works well on those bits of end grain. There, I'm just checking to make sure we're there, and that's enough. So now we can start thinking about our final shape, but also getting a nice finishing cut. So that's sacrificial. This is going to be the true base, and we've got a nice little upturn with a little concave cut there. So I'll finish that, I'll get that nice and clean. We can turn the lathe speed up now a little bit because we've got rid of a lot of that unevenness.
What RPM are you running at?
So now I've turned it up, it's 1,000 revs. Do be careful though, so each one of the bowls that I'm turning, if it's a rough turn bowl, the speed may be different on every single one because it could be out of balance differently on each one. Also, different timbers require different speeds as well. Balance is everything, so start slowly and work that speed up. Don't take my speed that I'm turning at now as gospel for your bowl. You need to nurse it up nice and slowly so you get no surprises. Now then, let's start thinking about a shape. I don't want anything too fussy, maybe a slight OG. So I'll rough that And now let's go for a finishing cut. So I've got two options here. I'm going to start with a push cut and we'll see how it works.
Can you repeat what RPM it was?
So at the moment I'm running at 1000 RPM. Well, actually 1039, okay, to be exact. At the moment. So the pressure for me is up the length of the tool now. This hand is support. And we'll just have a quick look to see what that's like. Okay, so we've got a nice finish on there. A little bit of breakout here, which we can clean up in a second. But that's okay. In terms of thickness, I've got plenty of thickness there. The colour's quite nice. I quite like the colour. I'm not happy with this. This is too much of a concave there. So I'm going to just cut the wrong way just for a minute. We're going to clean that up. That's better. My trusty skew again, just to give it a little tweak.
What was the RPM before the increase?
It was about 800 revs. It was really slow. Really slow. My lathe wouldn't let me. It was just starting to shake a little bit, so I couldn't really go any faster. I'm just going to tackle this torn grain on the end here. Handle nice and low. Skew cutting almost with the gouge. There we are, and you're producing very, very fine shavings when you do that. That'll give you your best possible finish. Right, I think we're ready to sand. There's nothing nasty that's going to cause us issues there. Nice, basic, simple form. Right, Charlie, I'm going to get in your way now because I'm going to put that dust extractor on. So for mine and Charlie's sake, we're going to have this dust extractor really quite close. I want to carry on talking to you, so putting my full face visor and respirator on would cause a problem for that. So let's go. Before we turn the extractor on, we'll talk about sanding a little bit. So we're going to go through a range of abrasive from 100 to 150 to 4400. We're also going to add some sanding with a rotary sander. Again, if you've seen any of my demonstrations, you all would have seen this before. Rotary sander and hand sanding creates a crisscross, and they cancel each other out. So there we are. So we're 180, so I'm going to go 100, 150 by hand. Then we're going to go to a 180 with the rotary, then 240, 240, 400, 400. Okay, dust extractor then, please, Charlie. So this is, we're going to go silent for a little bit. I will shout at the camera, but I'll repeat myself. Okay, if you're bothered about dust, you can turn the lathe speed down a little bit.
Do you get a better finishing cut at faster speed?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a tooling speed. The faster you go, the better you will go, the better you will finish. How sharp your chisel is everything as well. You've got to have, when it comes to cutting, there is a, your safety is the most important thing. That's primary. Safety is everything. The bowl will only go so fast. It'll either come off the chuck, make the machine vibrate too much, explode, all sorts of things can happen with speed. So it's one of those things you have to control. But the faster you go, the better the finish will be. But like I said, use those words wisely. A little bit of tearing here we're going to get rid of.
What about wet sanding?
Say that again?
What about wet sanding?
Yeah, wet sanding is okay for exotics, for smaller pieces, for acrylics, polyesters, all those sorts of things. The trouble with wet sanding on a piece that's so dry as this, it will probably cause you a few more problems. You could though wet sand, so spray it on your final grits to raise the grain, that will give you a lovely finish. But there would be no need on this sort of piece. But your exotics, definitely. Wet sand or sand with wax. Nice slow speed. There we are. So that is the 150. Now with a 150, what you'll get is you'll get these little, I don't know if the camera can pick this up, but you'll get these scratches running around the bowl. Now a rotary sander, its job is to take those away.
What tool rest would you use for a deep bowl?
For a deep bowl, so you've seen me, I've got the 12-inch tool rest here. That's pretty much what I'm using for all of the work that I'm doing and demonstrating for you. If not, then there's some great tool rests from Robust. You can get big L tool rests, you can get C tool rests, you can get some really big, long, beefy tool rests. They are my favourite, I have to say. I know as a company, Axminster, we are looking at them, potential, but they would be my favourite. But most of my work, I don't own one at the moment, but all of my work is done with the standard. That's actually a 14-inch tool rest on this lathe. It's all done with that one. Now let me show you quickly that those lines have now disappeared. A little bit there, we'll take that away now. But apart from that, 240 grit.
And what grit was on the Hope sander?
Started off with 180. And now I put a 240 on there, so this is 240 hand sanding as well. 240 on this one. Now we're going to go 400 by hand and 400 on the rotary. We're going to oil this one, by the way. We're going to put a nice bit of finishing oil on here. How long will we be, Charles?
Half an hour. One final bit of sanding. So just with a little bit of 600 now. That's lovely, Charlie, thank you. So a bit of oil. It's alright with the oil, you can lather it on, you can really get in there. With oil, I tend to go a couple of coats. So what would happen, we'll put this coat on,
I'm going to sand it in at a very slow speed. So my lathe starts at 150 revs as its first on this setting where it will start. So I can sand that in. I can start to get the grain rising. And we're going to keep sanding until it starts to dry and drag. It doesn't take long. And then once it's done that, all that slurry that we're creating with the dust of the timber and the oil is filling the grains, so you get a lovely silky finish. What we're going to do is now burnish hard with some shavings, just to complete that drying process, or start it rather, not complete it. It's going to take probably, well, in this heat actually, because it's absolutely baking at the moment, it'll probably be set within about 2 hours. I mean, in the winter we're probably looking at overnight, but it's so dry, so hot, sorry, at the moment. Hence the shorts. So a bit of burnishing with shavings. This is getting some heat into the bowl. There we are. Now just a buff. Now once we turn the inside, I'll just give this another buff on the outside again, because it would have started properly sort of drying by then. There we go. And one thing I want to do before I turn that over is just put a little center point in. So this is going to be for my tailstock when we reverse to take off that bottom. Let you have a look at that before we turn it over. You get that lovely chatoyance, that shimmer of the grain there. I don't know whether the camera's picking it up. I can certainly see it. Yeah, really pretty timber. A lot happening in this bit of wood actually. They're quite nice. So let's take it out of the chuck and flip him over. A different set of jaws, remember. So we're going to take him off.
Why don't you use a tack cloth before polishing?
Because I'm oiling. So there's no need. So we want that dust to become part of the oil. That is then filling the grain and giving us that silkiness. So that's all part of it. I would use a tack cloth, or probably not a tack cloth. I'd probably just use a damp cloth if I was going to use a French polish, something like that, something that gets affected by the dust, or lacquers, spray on lacquers, that sort of thing. That can be a real problem. But even then, I don't worry too much, because usually once lacquered, I'll give them a second coat. So before that second coat, do a denib with a very fine abrasive, and then do your next coat. There we are. So we're going to grip our foot. We've already measured that to be nice and accurate. Really important. The more accurate you are with the feet, you'll find the much stronger the grip is. There's hardly any movement on that chuck when I tighten it up, because we know that we've got full surface contact. There we go. So let's start by cleaning up. We're going to take away quite a lot of that section. Now Charlie, the shaving's going to fly your way, so you might want to just stand to one side in a second. We're going to use the same bowl gouge, guys. And I didn't tell you on the before, but this one's just a regular. This is the Axminster premium range. This is the 3/8 bowl gouge. It's got a 55-degree bevel angle on the back, and I've swept the wings back a fair old way. I do that for teaching. It just means that there's less to catch when you do that, so much easier for a beginner to pick up and play. It's quite a nice deep fluted strong bowl gouge, that one. Now I've turned the bowl over, so I'm going to turn the lathe speed back down to 0 and slowly increase the speed. So back up to the same speed now, about 1,000. It still wants to move a little bit because we've still got that uneven surface on the inside. So now, instead of starting where traditionally, if it was a bowl blank, you'd have most of the timber, we're going to start on the edge. So I'm going to go down in sections. So let's get rid of the excess first. have a quick pinch for thickness just to see what we're doing. Let's go a little bit further. Just Taurus just dropped then a little bit, so firm everything up. Charlie, can you just pass me those ear protectors over there and get yourself a pair as well? One thing that we don't think about in wood turning, and it's something that I do say about in that drawer, buddy, when I'm demonstrating, is one thing we talk about and think about our lungs an awful lot. We think about our eyes an awful lot. We don't think about our ears, and when we're doing things like this, you can hear through the video, that it's making a lot of noise, and here it's deafening. So protecting your ears is really important. These are full ear ones, but just the little in-ear ear protectors will help with that noise.
How do you treat wet bowls?
Wet bowls. So this was a wet bowl. So
Roughed wet bowls.
Roughed wet bowls. This is what this was. Exactly what this was. So we started off. Okay, we started off with a rough turn bowl like this, and so this is where we are now. We're just looking at how we're going to hold this bowl. Okay, so it's been turned wet, now it's dried, moved, and got all shapes, and this is just finishing them off. So we're going to stop and have a check for thickness, a little bit deeper. In the middle, nice and slow, take your time, because you can quite easily tear the grain out from that bottom. Now I'm going to, what I call, look with my fingers first before I look with my eyes. I don't want gravy bumps and I don't want recesses in the centre. So I'm just looking for that, helping, just seeing any shadows. I've got a little bit of a lump here that we're going to work on.
You went from A jaws to C jaws. Would it be okay to go from C jaws to O'Donnell jaws?
Absolutely, absolutely. My jaw selection is just on the foot size that I'm using. It's nothing greater than that. So if I've got a very big piece on the lathe and it can be a sacrificial foot, I'll go with grippers. Otherwise, I'll go with C's, O'Donnells, A's. It's just the size that I need that dictates the ones I use.
It's been 40 minutes.
Lovely. Bring that extractor closer. Right, we're going to do a very quick sanding on this, guys, and then we're going to turn the bowl around. Okay. Beautiful. Same process as before. to 100 first. Big cupboard over there. Just checking for any nasties. It's pretty good though. There's a little bit more in that twisted frame. Now we're down to 150. That's fine. Sorry, I don't like it very much. So we want to go to 180 on the rotary sander. And we want to get rid of all those lines I've just made. So let's have a look. You could have, of course, use a power sander for this, no problem at all. But that's done us a really good job. I think a little bit more and we're done there.
Do all your bowl gouges have 55-degree bevel angles, and do you use swept wings on spindle gouges?
Let me come back to that in a second. We've finished sanding, then I'll show you a selection of gouges. So we're going to come back to that question. We're looking at angles on bowl gouges and shapes on spindles. So 2 seconds, we'll come back. So 240 grip now, hand and rotary.
Is sanding time factor or personal choice?
Say that again, is it time?
When you're sanding, is it time factor or personal choice?
This method is done to give me the best possible finish I can achieve. It does save a lot of time. You just hand sand, then you'll be there for a lot longer. Because this rotary sander is going the opposite direction, it cancels the hand sanding out and vice versa. So that's why I do it. Like I said, you could use a power sander. They do get quite hot though, so be careful with power sanders. You can damage the timber sometimes. This is a little bit friendlier. And for me, as I travel and demonstrate, it's just easier to travel with, you know. That was 240, so now we're going to go 400, 400. So 400 on the hand. On the rotary. bit of oil. For that lovely grain. So just before I turn the lathe speed on, never forget that I've got to turn the lathe speed down because it's wet at the moment.